Thank you. Thanks, everybody. I'm happy to be here. This has nothing to do with the talk, but the band you were just listening to is Telenovela. They're out of Texas. They're on Kill Rockstar Records. They put the best album last year called Poet's Tooth. You got to hear a sample of it, but not on the video because we don't want a copyright strike. Thanks very much for coming to my talk. If you want the slides, I highly recommend, because I go pretty fast and I have a lot of slides, that's the Tiny URL. Another shout out to Tiny URL for always making eternally available short links available. I just like them. Tiny URL is a fun thing to say too. All right, without any further ado, thank everybody that's in the sponsor halls. Without them, we couldn't be here. I have a favorite on this list, obviously, but seriously, go talk to them. This is part of why we're here, is to learn from each other, and part of the way to learn is to go talk to the people that are building and the people that are trying to solve these problems, because every one of these problems needs solved. Maybe not the way you think it does, but they're working toward the same goal, and I love that. But working, speaking of working, this is how I see most security people living their life in my observations of the world. You are behind a screen that is screaming at you for a million different things, and hopefully you got good scanners, and your scanners give you exactly the right information that's timely, it's actionable. That's the mark of a good scanner. Like our secret scanning that we make at GitGuardian, we know it's great, but that's the last plug of it for the entire rest of this. But we can sit there and when these alerts come in, they tell us scary facts of the world like this. I actually know these people, the GiveWP people. They're wonderful human beings, but oh man, it's on PHP, and oh man, it's on WordPress, and it's a critical of 1 or of 10, and this collects money. This is PCI related, ultimately. And then you're like, why did we get into this mess? Why the hell are we using WordPress in the first place? And it's, we got this giant mountain of tech debt that we really need to work on. That's how our jobs really got interpreted, is like alerts and tech debt. That's security, isn't it? And why this is problematic that we have this worldview is that we have to go get money from the executives. I wanted to be fair and just said them sitting on piles of money, because that's how executives work, right? They're sitting on the money. And we are screaming, we have tech debt, we have security risks. And they say, oh no, it's you again. And they don't know what these words mean. They know these words, tech, debt, and risk, and you say, we have these. And they're like, yep, we sure do. Because businesses run on debt. Like you have net 90s, you have net 120s. You probably are 3 years out on some invoices. And risk, you wouldn't be in business if you weren't taking risks. That's the whole point of being in business. You'd risk a little bit, you win a little bit. Warren Zevon was gambling in Havana, took a little risk. So they say, no, you don't get additional budget. This is just how we work. Good luck. And you go back and keep minding the dumpster fire, wishing that you weren't minding a dumpster fire and that you could do something meaningful and actually protect children from being ransomed and things like that. And you wish your life had more meaning. I'm Dwayne, by the way. Sorry, I didn't forget to say that at the beginning. I'm Dwayne. I live in Chicago. I co-host the Security Repo podcast. We have a new co-host as of the next week. He's coming on next week. It's a brilliant show. We've had Jason Haddix. We've had Tanya Janka, who's here, Janka, who's here at this event, one of my heroes. We've had all sorts of great Jason East Street, other people not named Jason, come on the show. Go check it out. It's available wherever podcasts are. It's also on YouTube. And feel free to connect with me. I technically am on Twitter, but I've never gone on it in like 6 months. So LinkedIn's much better for me. And if you ever want to talk about rock and roll or improv or karaoke, I love talking about those things too. So knit and crochet. If you want to come talk about them tonight, GitGuardian, who I work for, quick plug, is having a party at 7:30 at Lucky Strike. We have a name for it that I forget off the top of my head. What's it called, Aya? Defender Strike Security Showdown. Yes, all right. That'll be fun tonight. But I work for these people at GitGuardian. We have a booth downstairs to tell you all about our product, but we're all about secrets detection and solving that non-human identity, that machine identity problem that we've backed ourselves into. And I could talk for 3 hours on that, but that's not why we're here. Back on our mission to get money. The reason the executives won't give you money is because the people above them say, well, we have to be careful with our resources and we need to be resilient. Why are the board members saying we need to be resilient? Because that's what they've been hearing that companies need to be resilient. Some marketing firm, Gartner, said resiliency is what we're all about. It's not business recoverability, it's about resiliency. So what's resiliency mean? Well, resilience is this, according to the definition: capacity to withstand or recover quickly from difficult toughness. Toughness, or difficulties in toughness. Ability of substance, object to spring back to shape and elasticity. Rubber bands do this. Bouncing balls do this. Rubber bands made into bouncing balls do this. You use them the way they're intended and they return the original shape. You throw it at the ground, it bounces right back up, no damage done. It's a resilient thing versus a Ming vase. You throw that on the ground and it shatters, and now you've ruined a really expensive vase. That didn't happen to me. What does this mean for business? Business resiliency, according to Cisco, I love Cisco's documentation and I love their writing. I just really do. It's clean, it's crisp. I like it. But respond and adapt quickly to disruptions, significant unplanned changes. I think we can interpret that a little bit differently and say resiliency is how well do we respond to risks. But risks is now the tricky word in here. Resilience, I'm trying to what does resilience mean and why are we using resilience? It's because ultimately this is what the board actually cares about, is this idea of risk. And before we go any further, risk means something different to you than it means to the person sitting next to you, than it means to the person you're going to talk to next. Walt Powell, one of my heroes, the field CISO at Cisco, or field CISO at CDW, said this: my favorite talk I saw in all of 2023 happened at 10 o'clock at night with 4 people in the room at CypherCon 6 in Milwaukee. And Walt gave it, and he said this: risks aren't threats, they're not vulns, they're not exploits. Risks are what you're set to lose if things go bad. That's what a risk is. Now, from a pure security risk standpoint, security risks are very real. I'm not trying to talk down on them or anything. They're very real. We can do this really, really simple math. A threat times exploitability times criticality is the risk itself. So let's say there is an exploit on, I don't know, something we all use like OpenSSL, and it's really, really easy to exploit. And it's sitting there on the front of the internet. And the thing behind it is all of your private information. Oh, that's a nightmare. That's called Heartbleed, and we lived through it once. But what if that criticality piece, let's say it's an S3 bucket that contains all of your marketing materials. Good, please steal those and read them all, please. Disseminate them if you want. They're marketing materials. I want you to have those. There's no risk there. Those are extreme ends, but I think credit card information is extreme end, and I think cat photos are the other extreme end. So you do this simple math. I'm like, okay, this is how I'm going to think about risk. That is not a business risk. That is a technical risk, security risk. And this goes back to the problem, the board doesn't actually know what a CVE is. You can try to explain it to them. 1 to 2%, maybe up to 3% of board members know what a CVE is. That's kind of it. Their job wasn't to be security experts. Their job was to run a board that's helping manage a company and managing investor money. But there's also other kind of risks. So when we start using the word risk willy-nilly and say, oh, we're running into this risk, just know that everybody you say that to has a different version of what they think of risk. Is compliance risk the same as security risk? I think they overlap. Is operational risk the same as technical risk? Again, they overlap, but operational risks are we don't have power to the actual facility where we make the thing. Okay, now we can't do that. Are the supply chain risk, our truck full of the parts didn't show up yesterday. We can't do the job today. Legal risk, are we gonna get sued? Is that the same as compliance risk? Oh, again, they overlap. This is risk. It all depends on where you're sitting, how you're viewing that. And the board is trying their best to make sense of this themselves. So a quick desk exercise. If you've never seen this, go check it out. It's on YouTube. Slim Goodbody put out things for middle-aged dudes like myself, and it's hilarious. But desk exercise. So which of these, and there's no right answer. If you want to write it down, that's cool. But which of these do you think has the biggest risk for your company? I'll let you read them. Let's take a sip of water. If you don't use Jenkins, obviously it's not the last one. I don't know why I pick on OpenSSL so much either, now that I'm looking at this, but I do. Heartbleed hurt. Okay, whatever your answer is, that's great, but can you translate why into these 4 terms? What's the actual financial risk for your company from the thing that you picked off this list? What's the technical risk? Like what is this going to impact the rest of your stack? Is this going to contribute to tech debt? Like what's the actual technical risk we're taking? Organizational risk, how does this impact the entire company? Versus operational risk, which is, again, supply chain. Can we deliver what we say we're going to deliver in the time we said we're going to deliver it? Congratulations, you all just did a risk analysis. And you should be proud of yourselves. This is hard. This is really hard work. This is the hard work that intelligence people go through and say, all right, we got to figure these things out. Now, why these four? We'll get back to that. Oh, a conversation piece. You notice I didn't have reputation anywhere on there? Raise your hand if you think reputational risk exists. All right, now raise your hand and tell me that reputational risks exist when a multi-billion-dollar company can cause the entire global transportation system to shut down and strand millions of people, and they're not in court being sued out of existence. This was taken yesterday. They're up 16% on the entire year. They're down 11% from their high, or they were down 30% for a minute, and they're back to 10% down from the dip. And if we wait another 6 months, they'll be higher than they were. That's the math. It's 50 days is the average recovery from a reputational risk incident until you're back to where you were. Reputational risk is a myth we told ourselves, and we got to get it out of our heads. Because going to the board and screaming, hey, we're at risk, and they look at CrowdStrike's numbers, and they look at the fact that, anyway, so many other companies still exist. Who got to live through SolarWinds? Anybody? Was that fun? Are you glad they're still in business? Yeah, their investors are because they make more money now. We get questions at the end. I saw your hand, but.
I think it really depends on the industry. Different industries would suffer different, would experience different damage of reputational.
So for the mic at home, is reputational is dependent on the industry? Absolutely right. What? Ask Kaspersky, yeah. Kaspersky Labs, yeah. There's other issues going on with that, but yeah. All right, we'll move on from that. That's a whole other separate conversation piece. So let's go back to how we generally think of risks and our technical risk, our security risks, our risks we deal with. When we say we have this risk going on, this exploitability, this threat, this exploit, the criticality of it, then we have to do the math of like, are we going to fix this or not? How do we fix this? Is it likely we're going to fix it? And we had to do this math as well. And for us, this is pretty straightforward because you have basically two options. One, you can throw it over the fence and say, hey, good luck, developer. Or you can do the research and say, this is how you actually fix it. One of the nice things about CVEs and why I like them as a system is they're standardized, and we can build things like the KEV database out of them, the known exploit vulnerability, whatever it stands for, database from CISA. If you don't know about this, it's another scoring system for CVEs that are actually shown up in the wild that actually have been remediated. So if it's an exploit, if it's a CVE that's on KEV, somebody already fixed it, guaranteed. Otherwise, it wouldn't be there. So that's another really good tool to have. Anyway, but you're doing the work of like, all right, developer, figure this out, and let's solve this. Or you sit back and watch the garbage fire more. Say, yeah, we're just not going to fix that. Again, if it's cat photos, please get them. You can have my cat photos. If it's real story, if it's teenagers' driver's license in the state of Texas that got stored in an open S3 bucket, and then after they were told about it, another 11,000 got added over the next 6 weeks, yeah, you should probably fix that. The fact that they're just watching the garbage fire burn and waiting for those kids to get identity stolen makes me sick. All right, but let's go back to this problem, because that's actually what we were trying to solve, wasn't it? Like I don't have any additional budget problem. Yeah, because we ran in yelling and screaming about, hey, I got all these risks, I got all this debt. I got a critical 10. You know what that means. Oh, but let's talk about debt for a second, technical debt. That's the other piece to this. We look at technical debt and we're like, hey, we got all this debt. We got to figure this out. Who here believes that technical debt is an actual thing? From a practical perspective, from your seat, you're probably right. However, we also need to step back and say that the term technical debt was a friggin' metaphor. Ward got hired in, I think, 98, 2002. Anybody know? 2002, I want to say. got hired by a financial services company. People that literally sit on piles of money and make it move around. And they're like, we got to get this out the door now. And he's like, well, yeah, but we're not done. And they're like, but we got to do it. And he's like, okay, here's how this works. It's like a high interest credit card payment. We're gonna have to pay it really quick. If we launch right now, then the next thing we do is clean that up. Otherwise, we're gonna literally eat us, and it's gonna be more expensive than anything else we can do. And because he's talking to financial people, he said it's kind of like we're taking on a technical debt. And in that scenario, in this moment, it's perfect. It's an exact analogy. It's 100%. And then Ward goes home and writes a bunch of papers about this, which are great. You should definitely read them. I don't disagree that technical debt is real. The problem is, who raise your hand if you've ever read anything that Ward Cunningham has ever written? Yeah, I kind of expected you to, sir. Gentlemen in the audience get lit up when I talked about Ward Cunningham. Yeah, but that's the problem, is the people that are sitting on the side of the money, other than the ones that actually worked with Ward, they don't know. This is something, again, technical people said, we got this exploit that's gonna kill us, and oh, we got all this technical debt to clean up, and they're like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Also, we took that idea, I was supposed to be animated, failed, from the movie Stripes. We took this idea of technical debt and said, this is gospel truth. This is how it works. This is a real thing. Not a giant metaphor. We said, this is the fact. And then we started telling it to everyone else. So the next person in line got told, this is technical debt. This is what it means. I had a wonderful conversation last night at the JIT SimGrep get-together, and I asked everyone at the table, what's technical debt mean? I asked 4 people and got 4 completely different answers, including one from an investor at a very large company who's like, well, I know, but I don't want to define it. Like, that's kind of where we're all at. Like, I know what it is, but what's the actual definition of it? Why is it so elusive? Well, if you go look this up, I spent 40 minutes trying to find a definition. This came from the GSA. From not even an official statement from them. This was a blog post that mentions technical debt. That's where this wording actually comes from. We got to step back from, every time we say technical debt, I want everybody from here on out to say in their head, it's a metaphor. What am I actually trying to say? And if we can do that, oh, I think we're gonna have much better conversations. It's a flawed metaphor. All metaphors are flawed. All metaphors are close to do, but they're an approximation to get a point across in a few words. Because we don't want to go through the entire explanation of why Ward couldn't get the project out the door in time. Just didn't have time. All right. So this world of technical debt and security vulnerabilities and exploitabilities and VEX and CVEs and all that produced this world of marketing and this world of analysts that also said, you know what? We need to make our businesses resilient. And your board of directors, they ain't got time to go do this research themselves, so they trust the highest paid consultants in the room. And so the consultants all said resiliency. Now you need to be resilient. And they're yelling this at their exec teams. I'm just gonna say these people are exec teams. Wow, when did it start doing that? That's literally new. I've never seen it do that before with the red. I love updates in Chrome. Fascinated by that, I'm like a little cat now. But our exec team, I'm just gonna say this is an exec team. You gotta remember your board of directors is made up of individual board members, human beings, like you and I. You got any board of directors in here? Any members of a board? You don't admit it out loud, that's fine. I'm not myself. I've been invited a couple times to nonprofit stuff, but not done it. But board members tend to be board members of multiple things, multiple organizations. They're trying to weigh the pros and cons of all these things, not just with your team, not just with that group, but they're worried in the big picture. So they're hearing resiliency out there across the world, and they definitely need the help, and they definitely need the research, and the analysts are, again, doing great jobs for highlighting these issues for them. But let's also not forget their actual jobs. It's not to advise these people. It is, but that's not the goal. The goal, if you ever read The Goal by Goldblatt, the wonderful book, the Phoenix Project is loosely based on it. It's a narrative. It's really, really good. The goal is money, period. Very, very blood simple. The investor's job is, or not investor's job, the board's job is to mediate the investment in a way that returns on that investment at a future time at a large enough rate. There needs to be an ROI. Otherwise, why on earth would people invest in your company? There's a few examples in the world where we've never monetized and they're still successful somehow, but by and large, a company needs to make money back. And that's the board's job. It's like, we're gonna guide you to your mission. And unless you're a nonprofit, unless you're literally trying to do anything with education or whatnot, your goal is money. Let's just assume that's the business, the corporation, the entity, the enterprise's main focus. So their job is to mediate this relationship. I'm gonna represent all the investors and say, we're gonna make good decisions, but there's only so much money. You have to give all that money and be a profit center. Anybody hear the conflict with security already? Security is mostly seen as a cost center. Every time you were all in a room, it's like, I need more budget for this. They're like, we just gave you budget. What did you do with it? It's like, we used it for pen testing. Oh, man, okay, how are we gonna make money off of this? That's what exec teams need to go back to the board to say, this is how we're making you money. This is how we're protecting the investment. Now, board members themselves are all individual people. Let's never forget this. And they're having these conversations among themselves and saying, all right, you can leave the room now. And then they're like, well, what does this even mean? How do we balance this? Again, not as a board member. I've had many conversations with board members putting this talk together in just the last 2 years of my life in general. And they're all like, yeah, it's like, how do we reach that consensus? How do we know that we're talking even about the same thing? We're all representing the investors, sure, but our worldview might not line up exactly. So that's why I love this analogy of looking at the same problem from different eyesights. So what's the reality for them? I love and I hate the Harvard Business Review at the same time. The reason I'm citing it is because it's super influential. Love it or hate it, just like Gartner, this is the conversation that's going on at a certain level of industry. I'm not gonna read it to you, but 65% think that their risk for a material cyber attack for the next 12 months. Half of them don't think they're prepared. And at the same time, they're trying to do this. That's hard. According to research from Harvard Business Review, same article, it's linked, I didn't put it at the actual full URL up, but it's linked in the speaker notes if you get the deck. The research showed that some boards have no focus on cybersecurity whatsoever. There's not even a conversation going on. It's just part of that larger resiliency conversation. Just fold it in with that. Like, how are we resilient? Great, I understand that word. I'm supposed to use that keyword. But the ones that do treat it completely like a technical aspect, because again, security sprung out of IT, fully formed. We are IT. But the same way that we're in that Venn diagram, we're all security, we're all IT, we're all on the human resources side at some level. So what they suggest is the healthiest boards, boards that actually do have healthy cybersecurity programs going on in their organizations, are asking these specific questions, which point back to those 4 risk categories I asked about earlier, I asked you to think about earlier. That's where they came from, is literally this work. Well, their work and some other people's work. But I like the summary. It's like, what's the security risk to our business from an attack? What are we doing about it? What's the organizational risk? Can we recover from it? And then supply chain side. Can we do what we need to do? They use supply chain, but I think they mean something else. But anyway, when I think supply chain, I think SCA, but that's a whole other matter. Ultimately, every board just wants this. Everybody just wants this magical piece of glass. And you can buy one for $10. It's really cheap. Cesotopia, great company. But yeah, you can just buy a single pane of glass. This is as useful as any other single pane of glass. Because what Harvard Business Review says next, in a different article that referenced the article that I was talking about, they said, well, what's coming in vogue is this thing, the Balanced Scorecard for Cyber Resilience, CVSCR. I'll give you a second just to stare at it in its beauty and simplicity. Yeah. Built off the work of these 2 gentlemen, both Harvard professors, One worked for KPMG, and the other one a firm called Renaissance Solutions. But David and Bob came up with the idea in 1993. Why am I in 2024 talking about this? Because it's only recently been applied to the cybersecurity and cyber resilience. This is the new part. The balanced scorecard for how do we manage risk. We've been doing that since the beginning of time, folks. That's what life is, where it's a whole set of trade-offs and risks, and I'm gonna do this and I'll expect this reward. We intuitively do it. Like when you buy a drink at the store, you're taking a specific risk. Am I gonna buy whiskey and maybe I won't be able to drive home? I'm gonna buy Diet Coke and maybe give myself brain damage. Am I gonna buy regular Coke and give myself diabetes? I absolutely don't like sodas. Or am I gonna choose water, which should be free? Anyway, if we think back to the BSCR, sorry, it's got 3 parts because it's real simple. You got a stoplight indicator, the biggest risk window, and the action plan. And the action plan lets you know what you're doing about this thing. This is, again, formal definition stuff. But it boils down to this. What is our biggest risk? What's the action plan around it? And where are we on this plan? Where are we on our journey? Now, going back to their example they used, this is the actual one for their supply chain. So the biggest risk is the potential leak of our data held by vendors. Oh, that's a huge risk. Like if your vendors aren't guaranteeing you that all the S3 buckets are secured, assume they're all open because they get shipped open. That should terrify everyone in the room right now. Go talk to your vendors and make them guarantee you, attest to the fact that they locked down their S3 buckets, among other things. Anyway, so action plans, you work with the vendors to ensure adequate cybersecurity, and they're only 25% of the way done with this project. We've talked about 25%. Now, obviously, this is a very quick way to walk into a room, say, hey, board of directors, here's what we're doing. You asked for it in this form. You got it in this form. Here's what we're doing. And then they look at that, and like everything else you've ever shown them in your entire career, they're like, what on earth am I looking at? This assumes a very large amount of things. You didn't just write the scorecard, you did a lot of back work to get here. Now, there are arguments against using CBSR, or CS, the balanced scorecard for cyber resiliency. I'm just gonna stop using the acronym. Apparently my brain won't accept it. But these are the biggest complaints the internet has about the system right now. I think the most telling one isn't that it requires buy-in. Of course, every system requires buy-in. Every system works if you use it the way it's intended and everybody bought into it. Difficult to understand, yes. Just looking at this, can you tell anything about this company and what their mission is? And like what they're actually trying to do, how are they guarding their investment dollars? No, absolutely not, it's kind of silly. But this last one I think is the most troubling one in the entire list. These are so unique to your set of circumstances that you can't transport them between companies. So thinking back to your board members are sitting on multiple boards trying to deal with this investor problem of ROI, are looking at different interpretations of this every time they go into a room, that is maddening. That has to be maddening. So what do we do instead? What did we do beforehand? Well, every CISO I've talked to in the last year, I ask them basically this question, like, did somebody force you to use a scorecard? The answer in about 40-50% of the times was yes. It's very unscientific data I'm giving you now. Said, yeah, they tried. And I gave it to them, and they had no idea what they were looking at, and started asking me questions about the form factor. And I was like, I got 15 minutes in front of you as your CISO. Instead of that, here's the actual presentation that I would have given you if you wouldn't have made me build a stupid scorecard. Paraphrasing. Here's the actual information. And here's a binder, or not a binder, but here's a PDF. It's 90 pages long with all the supporting evidence. Everything that you'd ever want to know about anything I just said or am about to say is in there. And I'll never forget, a Fortune 50 CISO said, and every time there's one of the board members will pick up the folder, I actually printed out for him, flip through it, turn to a random page, look at the page, look up at my slide, shut the thing, and that's the last time anyone ever looks at that folder. It was a Fortune 50 company. He has to do this in order to get anything done. It's a nice additional benefit, in my opinion, the scorecard. It's a nice additional layer if you've done all of this work. If you've done this and you're ready to go in and make your presentation. Quick, completely side random note. All the images are ours. We own them. This is public domain. This is all from Wikimedia. This is all Creative Commons licensed, no attribution needed. By the way, in case you're like, where did you get these pictures? Most of them are cited in the speaker notes. Like I have no idea what she's presenting. Something on mental health, I think. But anyway, we need to present things so crystal clear and have the supporting data. And if your board is like, we're on board with this, we're bought in, we love this idea, yeah, maybe you should go that final step and give them like a quick update with that. But that takes education and time and training. You can't launch new initiatives that way. You can track things you've already discussed. You've already got budget that's already rolling. So the other part that Harvard said that really struck me, and again, I started talking to people about, is like, what do they actually want? And it's like they want insights for what other companies are doing. Because if another company is successful, we should probably do that thing. I mean, CrowdStrike's so successful, they could crash the world. We should probably be doing what they did, because they didn't go away. No. But at the same time, the problem is you can't be copied from one to another. So how can you give the same insights from that kind of a system across the board? Well, there's these other things that you can communicate, these stories like, here's how we did it wrong. And I think there's a lot of power to this. And I think that's something I hear more and more out there. It's not a scare tactic. It's like, they're specifically where you broke down with your Uber. For those of you who don't know, Uber got pwned in 2022 by a 19-year-old kid from the Lapsus group. For $20, they bought super admin credentials on the dark web. There was MFA. They flooded the MFA. Somehow, for some reason, somebody smashed OK at some point. Gets in, VPN access, immediately finds PowerShell scripts, chock full of credentials for everything. He taunts HackerOne from within the HackerOne interface. Says, hey, I got into Uber. He flooded their Slack completely full of memes. And they say, oh, you internal prankster, this is not funny. And the next person he talked to is the New York Times, and that's why we know this story. It's because here's all the screenshots, I pwned them. Haha, they look bad now, don't they? Did anybody take an Uber to get here, by the way? Yeah, reputational risk. Circle CI. Who here still uses Circle CI? Even after they got completely pwned by a remote developer who was using a Plex server with the original default password that had never been patched, that's how we got in. Somebody on a Discord server discovers his Plex server, realizes, hey, this person's a developer that works at Circle CI. Let's plant some malware that steals all their credentials, and we can use those to get into customer sites that steal credentials. The same day, as a fun fact, the same day they announced, hey, we got a problem here, was the same day a researcher said, hey, all my honey tokens went off inside of Circle CI. Something's going on over there. It was like a 2-hour gap between that announcement and him saying that in the announcement. Honey tokens work, they're cheap, they're scalable, they're great, we make them, but I'm not here to sell you on honey tokens, but you should be using them even if you don't use them from us. Oh, and then there's like all the other stories going on in the world. I gave you some very, very detailed. Again, technically, this is very interesting. But it's like, hey, we don't want to be BBC or Ticketmaster. Oh, by the way, this is just January to June of 2024, and these are only the major ones that are considered material. You can go argue with Stroh's on if that's true or not. That's where I got this information and all the screenshots from, specifically. I'm not here to pick on anybody, especially not here to pick on OWASP, but we suffered from a data breach. We don't want to be them. I can't tell you exactly how to be this other company in a positive way, but I can tell you how we can't be these people. And that's going to resonate a little bit stronger than just going in and saying, we got a CVSS score of 10, and it's really exploitable, and I'm really worried. It's like, all our data is about to be pwned, and we're about to get ransomed. That's a whole other conversation. Boil it up in terms that they care about. What happens when any of this stuff, by the way, none of these people went out of business. When any of this stuff happens, what's the actual material damage? So, wrap things up here, coming to the end. We got to stop doing this. We got to stop running in and saying, I got debt, I got risk. Oh my God, the sky's falling. because they've heard it so many times. And we need to speak in their language and say, we're vulnerable to something that's probably going to cost us $1 million a day when we actually get tripped up in it, because it happened to this other company and that was about their estimate, about $1 million a day. But hey, if you give me $25,000, I can fix this in about a week, maybe a month. Yeah, give me a month. But we won't be $1 million a day. Yeah, they know what that means. Losing money bad. Yes, okay, we can do this. How exactly do we lose money in this scenario? We get pwned, but I don't still help me understand. How do we get the money lost? And now your exec team has a story they can tell. They don't have facts and figures. They can go into that boardroom and say, you want to be resilient, right? To be resilient, and the definitions you've given me to meet our goal so we don't get pwned, so we don't lose $10 million a day, I need $25,000 to budget for this. Probably you're not going to have that level for $25,000. We're talking $2.5 million. Your IAM projects that you should all be investing in right now to solve the machine identity problem is probably a $4 billion ask you're going to need to make over the next decade. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of big efforts. It's a lot of big stuff to talk about. But we need to be able to arm our executives who do interface with the board on a regular basis to help manage the entire company. Help them tell the story. Make sure they can tell the resiliency story. Because at the end of the day, aside from money, their job is to make sure everything runs smoothly. The ROI is the biggest driver, but they want everybody to be maybe not happy, but at least contented enough that the system keeps moving forward. I applaud the board of directors. Thank you for giving your time and your effort. If there was anybody in the room, hopefully if there's a board member watching at home from anywhere, thank you for all the work you do, because it's honestly amazing stuff. It's really complex. It worries about big picture stuff in a way that I, as an end user and a person who gets up and talks about things, don't really worry about too much. But whenever in doubt about what you're about to say to somebody, just remember, if you talk about threats, vulns, and exploits, you talk to another practitioner, oh yeah, all day. I'll have a conversation with you about CVSS versus EPSS all day long. I love that conversation. But I'm also not trying to give money to you, or you're not trying to ask me for money most of the time. Risk means something very different to every single person you're going to talk to. And if you can understand their point of view and how they view the risk, you can have an intelligent conversation with them. This is true of anything in life. If you can get to their level of where are you coming from, man? Did anybody here read The Phoenix Project? Highly, highly recommend reading it. It's a great book. And then The Unicorn Project next. But there's a point in the book where John, the CISO, he is the Department of No. He's the worst person. He literally hits a crisis in his life. And how he gets out of that crisis is he goes boldly into the CFO's office and what do we actually care about here? And for the first time in his entire career, he actually understood what security was supposed to be doing. Not the Department of No, the Department of Enabling Resiliency at scale. And that's what he started doing. And the book turns around. And he has fun pen testing, and his job and his life magically change. Have those conversations too. If you haven't talked to, that's the conversation I've been trying to drive more and more with people I meet, is have you ever talked to the head of HR, just what does HR actually care about here? Well, have you ever talked to the head of engineering, what is their actual worries? The head of recruitment, what do they care about? What's their security concerns? It's shockingly different. It's all the same, but it's through different lenses, and it's wonderful. And remember, it all overlaps. Yes, legal concerns, or sometimes compliance concerns, or sometimes technical concerns, or sometimes business concerns, or sometimes supply line concerns. But if you take the biggest step back you can, and you're above your executives in a hierarchical manner, not literally you're taller, and you're looking down, you care about that middle little red dot. You care about this. Security really cares about this. Business operations cares about this. But they overlap on these things. So trying to tell this story is really complicated. So that's why when you say vulns or exploits, it's too in the weeds. What are we going to lose? What did the other company lose that we can not be them? Anyway, that's my time. I'm Dwayne. I live in Chicago. Check out the Security Repo podcast. We have some amazing, amazing guests coming up, some brilliant conversations. And don't forget, tonight we have this party out at Lucky Strike down by the ballpark, 7:30 p.m. And if you want more information, come to our booth downstairs. I am very happy to tell you anything about what we do as a company and tell you how to get to the party. So thank you very much. All right, I think we got time for a question, like one.
Yeah, does anybody have any questions? Please raise your hand so
It doesn't
I
have
can
to
bring
be
the
about
mic.
this. It can be literally about anything. I'll just spitball.
All right, question here.
You spoke about like putting a money value to the risk.
Yeah.
How do you come up with the money value for the risk?
That's a great question. That's another place where stories from other organizations are going to help. At the end of the day, someone knows this probably cost us this much. But it might not be dollars and cents like our money in the bank, dollars and cents. So doing the math, like I don't know how much you pay your average developer, but if they have to sit idle for 6 hours because your production system completely went sideways because it got pwned, what did that 6 hours cost you? Not just their pay, but what would their output have been? What you got done? How much more value could you have added to the bottom line? That's going to be a completely different number for every company, and that's why I'm not saying there's a magic formula I can give you. It's analysis of former events. Don't predict the future, but they inform the future. So going back and saying, hey, we hit this incident. There's a really good talk at Blue Team Con this year from a defender. 1 year anniversary of the ransomware attack they lived through, took 500 machines offline in an industrial setting. They know down to the penny what it cost them to be down for that time. But they knew that before the incident. There's math has already happened. That's what I'm saying. Go talk to your CFO and like, hey, if this thing went away, what would that actually mean for us? And watch them panic and squirm and be like, oh, there's an actual number there. That's not your job, unless that is your job. But you should be interacting with those people and having those conversations at scale with everybody you meet.
So if I
Wait, hold on, we've got just for this is going on the YouTube.
So if I happen to know how much per minute downtime would cost me,
Sure.
how can I associate with that downtime with the security risk? Because the downtime can be for a lot of reasons.
But that's where the actual risk comes back into the story. So I'm not saying never say we're at risk and don't talk about like this thing's going to happen. But in the case of Uber, it's like, hey, we have all these PowerShell scripts laying around, and they're all chock full of actual long-lived credentials. What we need to do is if anybody gets in, make sure that they can't use that to cause this. And the likelihood of them using this information to cause that is exponentially larger than it was for Uber because it's not a car company, it is like our company. And you start having that conversation. There's no one right set answer to that, but tying it into the larger story of this is how this worked over there, this is what they lost, this is what we can fix, and this is what we can prevent by targeting this. There's no 100% right answer to that, but you can have that larger conversation of there's a dollar figure associated with this instead of there's a CVSS score with that. That's kind of my point.
Is it a model somewhere that we
Yeah,
can
there
track?
are a bunch of them. And if you talk to anybody that does like investments, like risk management. Oh yeah, risk management. Risk management's a whole field. It predates computer science by years and years. Computers made us really fast and good at it. But like risk analysis, threat analysis, we've been doing that since the beginning of time. So there are tons of models. I am not versed well enough of them to tell you one or the other. Just to be honest with you, I'm walking on the shoulders of giants and tiptoeing there. Everything I'm saying, I'm copying from someone else, or I've just had this conversation with people in the last couple of years of my life. And that was my whole point, is to raise awareness and get you all talking about it. But with that, we actually are at time, so I gotta go.
Yeah.
But,
So this has been an awesome presentation. Thank you, Dwayne. And as you wrap up, one last question for you. 3 things you'd like us to take away from today's presentation.
the telenovela is a band out of Texas that you should really check out. They're on Kill Rockstar Records. But no, the biggest takeaway from all the things I just said is have a relationship with people outside of your department and understand what they think is at risk. Because when the time comes that you need to help them, you don't want to come in as a stranger that's saying no and screaming about things that they don't understand. You want to be able to say in their language, gently, like, here's how we enable you to not be pwned. And we go from the department of no to the department of how, and the how securely, we win. Why security is failing overall, and trust me, I think it is because we keep saying no and using language that's scary, and people avoid us. Instead of, oh, you've helped me in so many ways, and you helped me get the thing done faster, you helped me do it more securely, you helped us win. We need security. Can you come and be in more of our meetings? That's how I think we can tell if security wins, and when you get invited to more stuff and be like, be part of the system. Don't be over there blocking us. Be part of how we got there. So that's the big takeaway. Talk to more people. At the end of the day, security is humans. That's it.
Thank you.